effort organized by Maitri. CWE is a way of enumerating the common programming errors, common vulnerabilities, common weaknesses in different programming languages. There are some things there that are programming language independent and some issues that are specific to Java, C, C++, so on. So it's a listing, it's a database of different kind of weaknesses that plague modern software. So just as an example, we might think of example destructive piece of destructive data, a repetition of one single ASCII character 256 times. Very simple kind of attack that can trigger a common programming error. And typically this kind of attack might trigger is a basic stack-based buffer overflow, for instance. There is a CWE ID for this kind of condition, so you might think of the destructive data first and then see how it maps into the underlying vulnerabilities. So it's a good way to describe what you are doing in a language that's also understood by the people who program the system, the people who have developed the system, or by trusted third parties, by search, for instance. If you are finding a vulnerability with a particular type of attack or malicious input, you can then use the CWE information maybe to give some initial information on what is possibly the underlying problem, even if you would not have access to the source code of the system that you are testing. There's a caveat here that CWE is still very much a work in progress. There's a lot of work being done by some of the MITRE guys in standardizing and actually collecting information on the different types of weaknesses that are out there. So in case anybody has some free time or too much free time in their disposal, like I would suggest that you take a look at CWE, and if there's something's missing there, you can help the MITRE guys improve it. Okay, so moving to discuss the different kind of expectations that software has about data. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the abbreviation TLV, type length value, which basically forms the underlying structures for any kind of protocols or file formats. So I'll go through some of our ideas about these different basic data types and take a look at what kind of attacks can actually be implemented or constructed against fields of these types. So let's take a look at some of the basic types. So the type fields in a protocol or file format, they typically define what kind of things are expected later on as, let's say, values or payloads or whatnot. So the type can be explicit. So there might be a protocol specification that says that there is a single type field with well-defined values that tell what kind of value is expected later on in the message. That is an example of an explicit type field. So when you know that there is an explicit type field, you can just start attacking it right away. Just change the type into something different. It's as simple as that. You already then undermine the expectations of the software that you are attacking. It's expecting for a value that is completely different. The structure for the value that comes later might be completely different from the one that the software is expecting. So usually these kind of types and their expected values are usually defined in some kind of specification. If it's a public, whether it's a public specification or a proprietary specification, there is always still some kind of mapping between the type fields, explicit type fields, and the values that are accompanying them. So you might also have implicit types. So you might have a header field in a, let's say, ASCII protocol where the value for that particular header field is expected to be a URI. It might be referenced in the specification. There might be some kind of sort of implication that a URI is expected, for instance. So this kind of type information can also be implicit in that sense. So you should always then try to mismatch your types and values. You should always try to tweak the types, use types that are not defined in the specification. Length fields, that's probably the most fruitful way of attacking modern software. Whenever there's a length field, there is a problem in handling those lengths and the values that those lengths define. So a length field simply defines how long or where a particular data section or a value is located, or how long the value is. There can be varying flavors of lengths. You might have very kind of explicit basic length fields saying that, well, here's a length, and after that will come a structure which is supposed to be of the specified length. But also things like element counts, offset values, array indices, length delimiters, they can also be thought of as length fields. An explicit length field is by definition something that you find existing within a protocol message or within a file format. So it's something that has been defined to be there. But there's also implicit lengths. So for instance, DNS name elements should not be more than 32 characters. IPv4 address is typically assumed to consist of 4 octets, and so on. So there might be these kind of implicit length constraints on the values that come later. And you should always try to undermine the length expectations both for explicit fields and also for implicit things. So if there is a space for an IPv4 address, why not make it like 1 octet and see what happens? Why not omit it completely and see what happens? So these kind of implicit lengths sometimes are very destructive in themselves, because there is some kind of expectation for the software that the data that comes in should adhere to a particular format. Especially if you have like multiple length payload dependencies, the best known example probably is the length fields, different length and offset fields in IPv4 packets. That's a very highly problematic thing to implement. So whenever you have payloads that overlap each other with length fields on each layer, it's always very fruitful ground for actually attacking and tweaking the lengths at all levels. So these length and offset fields, they come in multiple forms. You might have different types of endiannesses or lengths of the length fields themselves. You might have variable length, which is an insane idea. So ASN1 being the canonical example of these kind of weird things. Whenever you know that there is a length specified somewhere, you should obviously try very large lengths. Try very small lengths, break the dependency between what is in the value and what is specified in the length. So you can try for things like very large length but a very small value, or you can try very small length and a large value, those kind of things. And it's always a good idea if the specification says you can try 0 length, or even if the specification doesn't say that, why not try specifying a 0 length and see what happens, or negative length if that's allowed. Especially if the length is specified as some sort of string, it's always good to try -1 and see what happens. And if you have this kind of multiple overlapping length fields, just like go crazy, break all of them at the same time, try anything. Now, a lot of ASCII protocols they use delimiters quite heavily, and they are kind of like length fields in disguise, because they specify limits to the data that can can be transmitted. So ASCII protocols might have various kind of delimiters, and sometimes they use multiple different delimiters in confusing contexts. There might be new line spaces, commas, colons, forward slashes, backslashes, and so on. End of lines, null characters, zero terminated strings, these kind of things. They're all delimiters which state where the data should end or where it should start in another view. Some binary protocols also use length delimiters. ASN1, which is a bad idea in general terms, it's using this kind of indefinite length delimiter. You might have a single field or structure that has multiple different delimiters. So let's say URIs, for instance, they have various kind of special characters that can be considered delimiters, and you can always try to break them. So whenever you know that there is a delimiter specified, if you are trying to break a public protocol, for instance, or if you know that the proprietary format has certain kind of delimiter looking fields, you can always try to omit delimiters. You can try to overflow the delimiters themselves. So why not, in the case of like, let's say URI, why not insert like 10,000 colon characters at the end of the URI method, or do any kind of things. The other thing would be to try also wrong delimiters. So try, let's say, different kind of, try a semicolon instead of a full colon, or do any kind of weird things that you think might confuse the parser who is trying to make sense of the delimited pieces of data. Now, if there is a length field and a delimiter specified, that usually leads to catastrophic failure right away. So the belt and suspenders approach of using a length field, explicit length field, and then using delimiters in the actual value, very canonical example being length field and null terminated strings. That opens up again a new can of worms. You can then again try to omit the delimiter, use a delimiter in the middle, try it in the beginning, use multiple delimiters within, let's say, a string, use nothing but the delimiters, what happens then when there is no actual value, or you can then start tweaking the length field and then do all kinds of other things with the delimiters as well. Now, having looked at the type and length, when it comes to value, it's kind of the data that comes after the type and length, either explicit or implicit fields. Data is kind of ephemeral thing because many times the value itself is TLV again. So the value itself has some kind of either explicit or implicit substructure that can be looked at as another level of structural data. So the many values, actually most values, they have some kind of expectations for the validity of data inside the value. When you are attacking a basic value field, just try using a huge value, like very long value, or use very tiny value field. Compress everything and just use like one byte, or even 1 bit. You might run into some bit alignment errors or various other conditions if you just cut the value very short in the beginning. Always try different boundary lengths. For most values, there is some kind of buffer or boundary specified where the data gets stored. So try the different kind of boundaries that you could expect the underlying software to have. If there is some mandatory value specified in a protocol, for instance, or a file format, you should always try to take it away. Just don't let the software have its candy. Take it away from it and take away the value that is expected, that is specified as mandatory in a specification. That usually confuses a lot of systems. And then if you know that there is substructure within the value field, you should always start breaking it as heavily as possible. Look at the value as another TLV tuple and then start breaking the type, length and value within that substructure. So look at the value as another level of constructing malicious data. So for values, the most canonical example and the classic example obviously is the classic buffer overflow value attack. So nowadays buffer overflows can mean like other things as well. So the term has undergone some inflation within the past years. But traditionally the buffer overflow used to mean a very simplistic kind of fitting a particular piece of data into a fixed length buffer. And the way to attack this kind of